A college student is suing Yale University for breach of contract. I'm Scott Ott, and this is Bill Whittle Now. And Bill, the student Jonathan Michel, or Michael, I'm not sure how to pronounce that, according to the Hartford Courant, or Courant, however you say that, is not only suing Yale University for breach of contract and saying that they unjustly enriched themselves, meaning Yale unjustly enriched itself because it did not provide the full college experience all spring semester, but rather went to online learning about halfway through the semester, that they should refund some of the tuition money. He's seeking class action status for his lawsuit, and he's not alone because universities including UConn, Columbia, Cornell, Pace, Fordham, Michigan State, Drexel, Vanderbilt, the University of California, and the Cal State University system are all being beset with these kinds of lawsuits. Bill, it seems like a reasonable assumption that if you say you'll deliver a product and you're not able to fully deliver that product, then you owe at least a partial refund. What do you think?
Well, let me start by saying that I'm no friend or fan of Yale University or Cal State University or any of the other universities for that matter. It's been the singular, I think probably the single most depressing, even tragic thing that I've had to watch in society is watch what was once the absolute envy of the world, which is the not the American public school system, but the American university system. Is astonishing network of institutions of higher learning used to be. Watching them turn into a web of indoctrination centers where you can be rest assured that the main reason you might want to go to Yale is to make sure that you don't hear any new ideas. This is a catastrophe of monumental proportions. And so I'm not a guy who's sympathetic to Yale or any of these universities, because this is where I think most of our trouble started from. But there is such a thing, as force majeure, act of God, something along those lines. You can't very well accuse the university of kind of bait and switch tactics if they didn't know they were going to do the switching when they did the baiting. There comes a point when everybody in the world has suffered from what the Chinese Communist Party did and didn't do. And I certainly think that any subsequent tuition or things that happened after this event occurred is entirely up for discussion. But I'm not entirely sure. Look, it comes down to one thing, Scott. Did he get his college credits or didn't he? I mean, that's really what he's paying for. That's the key question, Bill, because really what that calls into question is what is it that Yale University sells, or any university for that matter. Years ago, I had a friend who tried, I don't know if he ever succeeded at getting to become a trustee of the board at Penn State. He was an attorney in town, and he once told me that about half of the value of college education, he believed, had to do with things that happen outside of the classroom. Certainly, Penn State sells itself like that, or at least did when I applied for a job there in the recruiting office, because they showed me the videos that they used to attract prospective students. And almost none of it had to do with classroom stuff. It was all about the experience of walking to the creamery with your friends and getting an ice cream cone and going to a football game and all those kinds of things. And even more tangible academic things like use of laboratories and theaters and other kinds of facilities at the university. Yale says that this claim is legally and factually baseless, and they plan to mount a vigorous defense. But I had a friend tell me yesterday whose kids are going to college, and I'll just make up a college in this case. He said, I feel like I'm spending $45,000 a year to send my kid to Stanford University of Phoenix. He would have been better off sending his student to the University of Phoenix, likely. Again, because of all of the political issues that we talked about before. That's not really the issue in front of us here. I mean, in California, the lockdown, I want to say was March 18th or something. Usually college semesters begin in early January. So I don't know what part of that he actually got. But again, we are not talking about some kind of capricious act on the part of any of these universities' administrations. We're talking about a worldwide catastrophe. Trillions and trillions of dollars of catastrophe, thousands and thousands of businesses being closed and people out of work everywhere. And I don't know that you have a right to to be able to sue for a world that didn't go exactly like clockwork. The question is, did he get the college credits that he paid for? Because when you talk about the university experience, I went to the University of Florida, had a great time there. It was all about the things you mentioned and so on. But the fact of the matter is, I spent the first of my 4 years of the 7 years of college that went down the drain. But my first semester was at Miami-Dade Community College, which was high school with ashtrays, Scott. I mean, it was really no different than that. It was just high school with ashtrays, but I got college credits that I paid for that then applied to my total at the University of Florida. You could claim you end up with a degree from the University of Florida, but if you spend a year or two at a community college or whatever. So look, I think that if you were to take the case that this guy certainly has the right, and everybody else in the country for this matter has the right to say, well, colleges, universities are not going to open for the fall semester, and everything that used to be appealing about a university is no longer appealing about a university, I would consider staying at Yale because I'm going to have to do some kind of online schooling. But if I'm going to be doing Zoom Yale as opposed to Zoom Phoenix, I don't expect to pay the same amount of money for that going forward, but I don't think that you have a right. I don't think that you have a right to find a university or any other business in this situation criminally responsible for, or even legally or even morally responsible for something that they had absolutely no control over that was of monumental consequences all across the world.
Well, he's only suggesting that they had control over one thing, and that was the power to issue a partial refund of tuition. You know, if I paid for a product up front that I expected to have delivered in 6 packages over the next 6 months, but the last 2 or 3 packages were only half full, I would expect a refund. I don't care what the cause was. If the manufacturer's factory burned to the ground, that's not my fault. You got my money. You weren't able to fully deliver the product. Why don't you give me at least a partial refund?
But the product is the college credit. And unless I'm missing part of the story, he got the full college credit.
Have you ever seen a commercial for a college that says, you want credits? You have cash? We'll take your cash and give you credits.
But that is what you're paying for. You talked about things like the university's experience at Penn State, Florida, wherever you go, Yale certainly. There's no question that there's such a thing as the university experience. There's no way to quantify that. There's no way you can put a dollar value on that. You can go to Yale or Penn State for that matter and never go out for ice cream and never go to football games and never do any of those things. What you're paying for in the example you used at Penn State University is you're paying for credit hours. That's what you are actually exchanging cash for. You are exchanging cash for a certain period of time of instruction for which you will get a food pellet called a credit, which has value in the world because, well, it did anyway, because that credit will eventually go on to determine whether or not you end up with a college degree, what kind of college degree, and where you got your college degree from.
But the food pellet at Yale is worth a lot more than the food pellet at Penn State, and it's not primarily because of the quality of the education or the caliber of the teachers. It's because of the people you meet and the experiences that you can have at Yale that are unmatched anywhere else. And so people know that a Yale student has connections. He's got juice in the work world that he picked up because he's connected to that network at Yale. And you don't get that in Zoom.
Well, that's fair enough. But again, he's paying top dollar for a Yale University education. And if he got Yale credits for it, despite the fact that the second half of the semester was done online, then he got what he's paying for. He got Yale credits. That's what he paid the money for. And it's actually, you could actually make the case that he has no right to this whatsoever, because if he's just basically saying, well, you know, I wanted the entire college experience, but I ended up going to the University of Phoenix for the second half of it, and so I should pay what I would have paid for an online university like the University of Phoenix, then Yale should say, okay, well, in that case, we'll refund your money, but you don't get Yale credits for the semester. You get University of Phoenix credits for the semester. What he's paying for when we're talking about places like Yale, and I have to stress again that this is all in the past. A Harvard degree used to mean something, means nothing now. It just means you know where the self spaces are that have the lovely ivy on the building. So he is paying for a Yale credit. That's what he got. And now if he wants to go forward with this, it's up to him. It's his decision. Same for every other college student around the country. Look, everybody got hit by this. The high school class of 2010, which is thousands of high schools, they didn't get a graduation ceremony. They didn't get a prom. Not getting your senior prom is a big deal. That's gone. And there's not a damn thing anybody can do about it. And to hear people say, well, that's not fair. You're right. It isn't fair. It's nothing like fair. But that's what happens in
Bill,
the world of being
Let me
unfair.
take your example. I paid for the prom. I bought the prom tickets. I rented a tux. I bought flowers for my date. And then they canceled the prom and they kept the money that I paid for the prom tickets.
But in your example, you didn't get squat. In the example of this student, he got Yale University credits.
Okay, I get to watch Beyonce dance on video.
It's not money I would pay $85,000 a year for, or whatever the number is. It's probably higher than that, but nevertheless, there it is, Scott. Look, as I said before, I think the two things that are operational here are, number one, this was an absolute enormous act of, I keep using the word force majeure like I know what it means. It may be the wrong term, but certainly it's an act of God that was unplanned by Yale University. This kid is paying for a Yale education. And what he got, assuming he finished the courses and got his college credits, was he got a Yale education credit. He may not have gotten the full Yale experience, but there's no guarantee he would have gotten the full Yale experience anyway. There's no guarantee that this guy would have done any of these social things that people talk about. He could have stayed in his dorm room the whole time, and that's that. Now, again, going forward, you got an entirely different argument. But in a case like this, I think, as astonishing it is for me to hear it coming out of my mouth, I think I'm going to have to side with Yale and the rest of the universities on this one, only out of a sense of fairness and out of an understanding that the world does not owe us perfect experiences all the time, and that sometimes when the world gets a haircut, you got to get a bit of a haircut yourself.
So final question. A lot of college students rely on grants and loans that are either actually coming through the federal government or subsidized or backed by the federal government, essentially backed by taxpayers or actually funded by taxpayers.
Right.
Do you think most taxpayers give any thought to the idea that their academic tax dollars are going in large part to provide something that's well beyond just a university credit or just skills or just knowledge, but is actually paying for this sort of nebulous, intangible college experience that is supposed to prepare people for life?
Well, that's an entirely different argument. Just to wrap this up as neatly as I can, the university experience that we're talking about has been heretofore been the university experience. It's online schools like Phoenix and all the rest of them, DeVry, that are new. When you talk about I'm going to university, I'm going to college, you assume that this includes the drinking binges and the fraternities and the football games and all the rest of it. So there's that. Can you ask me that question again?
I'm just saying, like taxpayers are essentially putting up the dough for this. Do you think that they fully embrace the idea? I mean, are they thinking, well, yes, it's good that we're helping young people get prepared who can't otherwise afford a college education? Or are they thinking, holy cow, a lot of this money is really going to things that aren't directly related to getting credits? Are you comfortable paying for that?
I'm not comfortable paying for it under any circumstances. I'm not comfortable paying for it if he gets the full Yale experience or if he gets the online Zoom Yale experience. It's not my business to be paying for his college education through taxation. This is, by the way, this is the reason why university educations have become absolutely ridiculously, astronomically expensive. And that's why, in some level, this pandemic is a long overdue correction. I want to say that this was bundled up with Obamacare. So it was a gigantic catastrophe. But it used to be, if you wanted to get a loan for college, you had to basically show a bank. Imagine this now. You had to go in and convince a person that you were likely to be able to repay the loan, and they would look at you as any other risk-reward equation. But once the federal government became the guarantor of student loans, once it became part of the federal government system, then in the same way that the federal government's interference with the housing market caused the housing bubble and then the collapse of the housing bubble. It's the same thing with the education bubble. If you're an educator, if you run a university and you want to charge $30,000 a semester for tuition, okay, and you hope that the students can find that money. But if the money is guaranteed by the federal government and you can charge $60,000 or $80,000 or $100,000 for that same experience, and the federal government's going to pony it up, and if the person can't pay for it, it's no problem, just goes on the tab along with everything else, what's to stop you from doubling, tripling, quadrupling your tuition rates and never stopping? So this entire idea of federally taxpayer-funded student loans or grants is nuts. In the olden days, back when we used to write on tree bark with sharp sticks, you had to convince a bank that you were going to finish college and that the degree that you were going to obtain would be one that would allow you to repay this loan. Now, that's not the case when you take out $220,000 so you can have your degree in Italian Renaissance poetry. But it was the case through most of it, and that's why so many people now have degrees that are utterly worthless, unless the only thing that they can do with these degrees is teach new people utterly worthless things at exorbitant fees. So on some level, the pandemic has been a necessary corrective to this out-of-control inflation on the part of universities. And while I've mentioned at the beginning that this is such a catastrophe to watch, I can't help but think that on some level, if people now, here's what I'm trying to say. Now that the university experience is off the table, at least temporarily, you are now reduced to what actual education are you getting during that semester? Because it's no longer about the ivy-covered halls. Now it's about how much education am I receiving for my dollar coming to me online. And that is an indication of what the education is actually worth. And community colleges, like I said, was high school with ashtrays for me, but I got all my freshman stuff out of the way that way. Now we will start to look at colleges and universities for what the value of their education is rather than their college experience. The residual dying reputation, like the dying reputation of the former newspaper called the New York Times, will continue to have some cachet for a while, but not for very much longer. And then we'll move into a world where you'll be based on merit and ability rather than on whether or not you attended some Tony college that maybe 50, 60 years ago meant that you were likely to be one of the best students in the world, but certainly hasn't meant that for some time now.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're grateful to the members of BillWhittle.com for funding this enterprise, making it possible for us to create more than 40 new episodes each month of Bill Whittle Now, as well as our other major program, Right Angle. And some of those people who just watched this episode, in the comments below, feel free to post the question, "Hey, Grandpa, what's an ashtray?" We understand that. We've got people of all ages enjoying this programming, and we're glad that our members feel free to share it with people around the globe. If you'd like to be part of the team that's advancing these conversations about important issues of the day, join us at BillWhittle.com by clicking that big green Become a Member button. For Bill Whittle, I'm Scott Ott. Thanks for watching.